Okay, I'm going to try to keep this participatory to keep you guys awake after that nice lunch NCC just gave us. So we're going to try to keep this kind of moving and talk about not only about agency coordination, but we seem to get a lot of questions as well as what's included in an MPDS threshold of 1 acre versus what comes out of that 1 acre threshold. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to do a couple examples. We'll also do an example with a road maintenance activity and how that's dealt with on the 1 acre threshold. So, you know, the agency coordination, I'm sure a lot of you in this room have had these big projects where you got multiple agencies involved, you got multiple requirements. Sometimes you feel those requirements overlap. Sometimes you feel those requirements may conflict with each other. So, you know, we're going to talk a little bit about that and some of the ways you can help yourself kind of to wade through that, all those agencies and everybody who you have to deal with. And as we talked about, what effect that has on your MPDS permit, the 102, the E&S plans, and what kicks you over that 1 acre threshold. So who are some of the different agencies and different groups that you deal with on some of these larger projects? Anybody? Shout them out.
PennDOT.
PennDOT. Everybody loves PennDOT, right? Okay. What else? DEP. How many different departments in DEP? Many, depending on what your project is, right? But who are the big ones? Who did we talk about this morning? The 105 guys, right? The 105 water obstruction and encroachment permits, right? So we have them, right? What's another big one? We're getting a lot of projects now, dam safety projects, right? So we have the DEP, we have their Division of Dam Safety that we get involved with a lot on projects. And we're going to go through a dam upgrade project and how that coordination works out. Another one of everybody's favorite, the Army Corps of Engineers, right? Anytime we get involved with the 105 stuff, we basically have the Army Corps involved as well. Fish and Boat Commission, right? We all get our bog turtle hits, you know, right? Pindy hits. PennDOT we talked about. Usually PennDOT involved in most every project. The Pindy agencies, right? We put in our Pindy, we get all our agency hits. DCNR, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Game Commission, Fish and Boat, right? So we have, and then obviously the municipalities getting those land development approvals before. So you got a lot of moving parts here. Bigger projects, there's even more parts to deal with. Here's our little laundry list of, you know, symbols and things. Some other people, Historical and Museum Commission, right? This guy's like, oh yeah, you forgot about them. They're one of my favorites too. Municipal, right? PNHP, Heritage Program. EPA, possibly EPA on your projects as well. So obviously we talk a lot. Drew talked about it this morning, you know, and some of the discussions here about pre-app meetings, okay? And why it's important to have those pre-app meetings. And also possibly trying to do meetings where you have multiple agencies in the room, okay? Anytime you're in these projects, obviously, getting coordinated early with all of the various agencies is key, okay? Is everybody familiar that DEP has a permit application consultant tool? Has anybody heard of this? Has anybody used it? Show of hands, anyone who's used it? Yes? Okay, good. We have one. So what it is we have an example and we'll kind of walk you through. But if you have one of these large projects where you need to discuss with multiple DEP agencies, you want to try to get that coordination done, possibly get a meeting together with all those agencies. You can go on here, you can put some information in about your project. That information then goes to the regional office. You know, they have a contact number. Now you have a, you know, they usually will get you a way to get these agency meetings going and get this coordinated. What are you trying to find out? I mean, the big question is, who has jurisdiction over what? Who's going to be ultimately the person who has jurisdiction over the different components of my project and the person that I have to satisfy, okay? So you want to identify that. Identify if there's going to be overlaps, if there's going to be things that maybe one agency wants that's going to affect another. Meeting minutes, obviously, in this case is very important, okay? Especially if you're having multiple meetings with multiple agencies at multiple times, one at a time, okay? So again, in this case, develop those meeting minutes, distribute those meeting minutes. Make sure if you're having a meeting with the 105 guys, you CC the Conservation District so the Conservation District knows what was discussed to see how that may affect something with your E&S plan or your NPDS permit or something of that nature. So again, and as we talked, those multi-agency meetings. You know, the thing you need to do with a multi-agency meeting is make sure you have enough information about your project. You've done some of the upfront studies. You know if you have wetlands. You know if you have EV wetlands. You know if you think you're going to have stream crossings. You're going to have other things involved in your projects. And have enough upfront information as part of that meeting so that there can be good discussion at the meeting, not just the meeting, well, we really haven't done anything yet, but we want to know what we're going to need to do. Again, if you could do a lot of those upfront studies before you have that meeting, that will help make the meeting much more productive. So, and what are you trying to get out of this? So what you're trying to get out of these meetings is basically who are going to be the agencies that are going to drive the approval? Who's going to have the longest time frame? What are the different permit decision guarantees? How is this affected? You know, is it better for me with my timing of the project? Should I submit to one person, get their comments before I go to another agency? Do I do them all together? So again, you're trying to get all of those questions answered, have a good idea of what's going to be involved before you start your project or before you get in too deep in it. And again, as we talked about with the NPDS, since we pretty much administer the 102 and the NPDS piece, what is going to count against that 1 acre threshold? So any questions on that? If anybody has any questions or comments along the way, feel free to discuss. So this is the DEP consultation tool. What it basically has, if you just go in and Google DEP PACT tool, you'll get to this. The first tab, and it really looks like the GIF form, the second part. The first part, basically you give some information about your project, a description, a project description, contact informations, location of your project. The other thing it allows you to do is you can actually upload files of your project or anything associated with your project that you can, you know, if you want to share that with DEP beforehand, you could share that and upload that into the file. The second part of that is basically the GIF form, the yes or no questions. Check the boxes that apply. Underground storage tanks. Do I have wetlands? What's my area of disturbance? Basically, you fill those in, go through that. What it'll do is then the third is a resource. It's just resources of the different entities and the different people that are going to review it. But when you submit the information, it'll generate a report to you of the different agencies or the different groups that may be involved in your project within DEP. And it'll also send that information about your project to the applicable regional office to start the agency coordination. So when you contact DEP, you're going to say, okay, this is the project I'm talking about. I put it into the PAC tool, help them get ready for any kind of agency or multi-department meeting at that point. So try it out. It's pretty simple to use when you have a bigger project and you're trying to coordinate that. Try this out, see if that gets you, if this works for you. Permit requirements, so talking about that 1 acre threshold, everybody's like, well, what's in, what's out? A lot of that comes back to this section right here, which is 1025, which basically says that if you're getting permits related to Chapter 92, which the 105 is part of that, you do not need to obtain any additional E&S or MPDS permits for that activity. In plain simple language, if these are areas of disturbance that are under that 102 permit, you know, they are excluded from the earth disturbance calculation for your MPDS permit. You still may need to get an E&S permit. They probably still need to be included in your E&S plans. But for the purpose of calculating the 1 acre threshold, they come out. So this is one of the more typical multi-agency projects we've been seeing more of. I don't know how many people have done a dam remediation project. Show of hands. Not many. Oh, 1, 2. All right. Okay. So this is a typical dam project. They have to upgrade the embankment usually to handle the probable maximum flood. We got a couple roads. We have a stream coming out of the dam, valve wheel to an inlet to an outlet structure, and some wetlands along the embankment. So I'll give you an idea of who we got here. So who are some of the entities we could be dealing with in this case? Anybody want to throw any out?
Dam safety. Dam safety.
Dam safety, yep. County Conservation District, potentially 105, potentially MPDS. What do we need fish and boat for? Drawdown, correct. So, and what are we, again, what are we trying to get here? Where are the different jurisdictional limits and what permits are needed for this project? So these, again, and what we'll do is we'll kind of walk through the different pieces of one of these projects and see if it, you know, where the different jurisdictions lie. So the first thing we usually have to do is have some kind of staging area, right, to do all this work. So let's say we drop a staging area right here, okay? So who would be taking jurisdiction on that? You're against the road, right? The municipality or PennDOT, right? Who else? Conservation District, correct? Would this count towards your MPDS permit boundary? Yes, that's correct. So again, E&S MPDS permit, maybe PennDOT if it's a PennDOT road, and you have to get in and out of there. So again, some people think that, well, it's all part of the dam project, so it's all covered under dam safety. Not necessarily. Let's say you have to build an access road to get access to that spillway location to do the spillway upgrades. So we drop that access road in there. And we got to go over the stream and get to the spillway. So who are we dealing with there? Who else have we just added into the mix? The 105 people, right? The Water Obstruction and Encroachment Group. Because now we need a permit, okay, for that crossing that goes across the stream. So again, we need E&S. Does this go towards our MPDS permit? Everything but the stream crossing. And what's floodway, right? Floodway area, 50 feet to 50 feet. Right, PennDOT, the municipality maybe for that road, and then DEP for the stream crossing. Any of the areas outside the floodway count towards that 1 acre threshold. Yes, sir.
Wetlands, if they're outside the floodway as well, if you're crossing wetlands in that same 105 permit?
Yes, if you were crossing wetlands, any wetland impacts would, and that you are authorized by 105 would come out of that 1 acre. What's that? I'll get that next one. Okay, so let's start. So now we're set up, we're ready to do the project. First thing we got to do is draw down the lake to do the work. So again, who's that? Who's involved with that? Fish and boat, right? So we have PA Fish and Boat that's going to need to get involved for that drawdown permit. Build the causeway to get out to the outlet pipe, to get at that. Whose jurisdiction is that under?
Dam safety.
Dam safety, correct. Because it's part of the work of fixing the dam.
And it's within the reservoir.
And it's within the reservoir, correct. Sheet piles around the outlet pipe. Anybody? Somebody who hasn't done a dam safety project? Dam safety, okay? Again, part of that. Coffer dam, right? Put a coffer dam around the spillway. Again, we're all part of dam safety. And dewatering the work areas, pumping that out, basically dam safety. So, okay? So, even though projects and items are included for dam safety, that does not mean that they're automatically excluded from the Army Corps, okay? So even though you may be getting approvals from dam safety for certain things, that does not mean that you don't have to go and get a separate approval for those same activities from the Army Corps. So in a lot of these things, you could almost insert Army Corps on top of this as well. So all of these activities are basically excluded from the NPDES permit in this case. So our next thing is we're going to upgrade the embankment. Okay, so here's the upgrades. Let's say we have to put roller compacted concrete, maybe do some wall work, some other things as well to upgrade this embankment. Now as part of that embankment, obviously that would be dam safety because that's all part of the dam works. Armor protection, again we're working within the bank, so that would be dam safety as well. Valve wheel repair, again related to the performance of the dam, so we would call that dam safety. Wetland impacts, how about the wetland impacts in this case? Core? Anybody else? Which section of DEP? If the wetlands are within the embankment or at the toe of the embankment and the embankment work impacts those wetlands, it's under the jurisdiction of dam safety. Okay? So that's an important distinction. If you're doing other wetland impacts for the access road or for other work that's not related to the dam, then that would be 105, okay? And again, these wetlands would still be, you would need Army Corps approval to do that work. Okay, so these are under dam safety. What about the off-site mitigation and the creation of the new wetlands if they're being done off-site?
How far offsite?
Mile up the road.
So that doesn't count towards your NPDES. Whatever.
Correct. But who would approve the mitigation?
So
105, correct. So that would be the Army Corps and the 105 group, the water obstruction and encroachment, okay? So that's an important distinction when it comes to wetlands. And again, all of this work, because it's covered either under dam safety or 105, would not count towards your threshold. Okay, repairing the spillway and upgrading that spillway. You're starting to get the idea? What would that be? Dam safety, right? Now we're going to upgrade this channel down below to handle the flows out of the spillway.
is that part of the original channel?
That's part of the original channel, yes. That's 105, correct. So our understanding and what dam safety has told us there is if there's an artificial channel that's being created from the discharge. So for example, if that outlet structure and that valve wheel assembly went into a channel, a man-made channel that then intersected into the natural channel, Up until the point where the artificial channel meets the natural channel would be dam safety jurisdiction. Once you're into the natural channel, that's 105 jurisdiction, okay? So these channel upgrades would be, I keep saying 105, that's how I think of it, but it's the water obstruction and encroachment group. If I say 105, that's what I mean. And again, these items would not be part of that 1 acre threshold. Okay, stream stabilization. So we have a stream area that's unstable down below that we're going to do some work to repair and do that. So who are we looking at there? 105, right? So as we move away from the dam, you could see the 105 starts to take jurisdiction. Fish enhancement structures. Fish and boat. Who else? 105, right? So we have fish and boat, and we have the 105 group. And again, these are activities that are authorized by 105, so they're not part of that 1 acre threshold. Okay, finally we're going to build a walking trail over the top of the embankment, connecting from road to road along the lake shore. Okay? So what do you think in this case?
Advise the client to do that after.
Say that?
Advise the client to do that after.
We didn't hear that.
So far, it looks like we probably could have done this without doing this.
What, I'm sorry.
So far, it looks just, I don't have a scale, but it looks like you probably could have done the project without amenities so far.
Okay, well, so let's talk about this. So obviously you have E&S in the municipality, right, to do that. Okay. The bridge over the, now you have to put a bridge over the spillway. Who's got jurisdiction of the bridge? Dam safety, right. So the piece of the walking trail that's over the top of the dam, the bridge that goes over the spillway, is part of dam safety. How about everything else? That's all part of your MPDS permit, right? So basically outside the spillway and the dam embankment is all to your MPDS permit. What else does this walking trail bring into play now? Buffers, right? You got to deal with the buffers beyond the dam safety areas, okay? So, again, we'll just kind of summarize this quickly. What's not included, any of the dam safety components and any of the water obstruction and encroachment areas basically come out. What is included, that would probably more than likely be part of that, is the access roads and the staging areas would be part and count towards your MPDS permit. Other areas not associated with the operations. And the E&S plan that's submitted, even though it would be a dam safety project, the E&S plan should cover all of the components of the work, including the dam safety components. A lot of times people may send us a very simplified plan of what they're doing with the dam, maybe not label a lot of things, maybe not explain a lot of what's going on the embankment. And we usually come back and say we need more detail on the dam safety pieces because we need to evaluate if the E&S is appropriate for the amount and the type of work that's going to be going on along the embankment. So remember that the E&S plan should cover all pieces of the work, okay? Not just the pieces that are outside of the dam safety. Yes, ma'am.
Can you get excluded from a stormwater management package?
Excluded for stormwater management?
If you're getting an MPDS permit, you're excluded from the trigger, does that area get excluded from like all?
Yes, yeah, we're going to talk about that a little bit with a road maintenance activity and how you can show that, but that's correct. If those areas are outside of that, they would be they're excluded from your, if they're not considered earth disturbance, they would be excluded, okay? But if they're still permitted and they're earth disturbance, they would still count, okay? So simplified cheat sheet a little bit, dam safety. You know, again, embankment upgrades, outlet structure upgrades, things having to do with the performance of the dam are generally within the dam safety. Any of the support things to do the work are usually excluded out. The stream crossings, wetlands that are outside dam safety's purview, any kind of channel upgrades to the natural channel would be outside of that dam safety. And the wetland mitigations, depending on location, can be outside as well. Yes, Craig?
So Mike, who reviews the ENS for those portions of the project that are under the jurisdiction of dam safety?
In our case, we review them.
Okay.
Yeah, the Conservation District reviews them. Yes?
There's no adequacy letter required for that, right? To get your,
Yes, we provide the adequacy letter.
but DEP, dam safety isn't always looking for them, right?
No, DEP, I believe it's similar to 105 where you can authorize the permits, but you can't do the work until you get your ENS adequacy. Similar to the 105 program.
Have you experienced a situation where DEP has said that they're going to do the review for the Chapter 102, even though there's a delegation agreement with the county?
They always have, again, we are delegated, but they always have the option to do the review as opposed to us. You know, they have that, they can do that if they wish. Okay? All right. One other thing to talk about, especially if anybody gets involved in dam safety projects or other ones of these large projects, is to look at, are there opportunities to do multiple project coordinations? This comes out a lot with the dam safety stuff. If anybody's involved in an HOA around a lake, you know, lakes are usually the ones that trigger this somewhat. It is an opportunity, especially when you're drawing down a lake for other work to get done and to take advantage of that. So, you know, it's a good time to do outreach. You know, in the case of a lake, you know, you have maintenance dredging, dock installation and repair, shoreline repair that, you know, Ellen talked about a little bit this morning, boat ramps, the vegetation management, get the knotweed out of there, things of that nature that can happen at that time. So it's important if there is a project like that where other people may have the opportunity or may want to do some things like that, that they know about that, and hopefully they can work on getting their permits and their things in order so that that can be done at the same time. Maintenance dredging, you know, that's a big thing that usually happens at that point. One of the things we will talk about with maintenance dredging is a lot of people think that that may be an opportunity to, oh, well, my boat's kind of got a low draft on it. I think I'll dig a hole in the bottom of the lake so I could get up nice to my dock. No, that's not authorized under maintenance dredging. You're not allowed to change the storage in the reservoir as part of your maintenance dredging. A lot of times people want to take stumps out. You know, that was a discussion we had yesterday. You know, maintenance dredging does not allow you to change the storage volume in the reservoir. That's a different kind of permitting, so that might be something just to keep in mind. A lot of people think, oh, well, this is an opportunity to, you know, make it nice and deep right around my house. No, that's not maintenance dredging, so keep that in mind.
Well, what if the lake was originally deep and now it's sediment in?
That's maintenance dredging, correct. But the big thing, I think, Ellen, you can speak to this from examples at Lake Wallenpaupack, I think.
Yeah, we have this quite a bit in Pike County where community will draw down the lake, and then now there wants to be maintenance dredging for the community, and you have to prove to dam safety and the Army Corps of Engineers that you're restoring it to its original depth. So usually these are done at like where the streams come in and there's sediment load coming in. There's a little peninsula now in the lake or some other source of sediment coming in, and you would prove through like. There's a lot of different ways to try to prove how much you have, but you know, you're removing 2-3 feet of sediment in some areas. You're not making a 2-foot lake now 8 feet. So you do have to prove that it's actually accumulated sediment. Anybody else?
Yep. And again, and another thing, I mean, and I think everybody tries to do this as much as they can, but just try to be aware, you know, design your project to minimize the amount of permits you have. If you can design your project and meet the objectives, again, without creating additional permits for yourself, and you can do that and still meet the objectives of the project, that's, something you should keep in mind. Again, we look at these items: designated existing uses, exceptional value wetlands. Can you work around the impacts to those exceptional value wetlands? Steep slopes, riparian buffer areas. PINDY, there's search thresholds, right, when you do your project, right? What does 40 acres of clearing trigger? Bats, right? Can you do your project and be able to redesign your project or look at ways where you could keep it under 40 acres of clearing to hopefully minimize bad impacts and also to get out of that. Rattlesnake hits, right? What happens when you get a rattlesnake hit? You have to have a biologist on your site, right? And you're paying a biologist to be there during construction. Can you reroute your projects around those potential areas? We see it with pipelines lately. We've been seeing this, flying squirrels, where they're clearing out large swaths for pipelines and power lines, and now the flying squirrels can't jump across the pipeline anymore, and now they're putting in poles. Is there ways you can get around that? Bog turtles, obviously, in Monroe County, the bog turtles. So again, there's questions there. Are you within 300 feet of a wetland? If you could move your project away from that and answer no, you're probably going to get out of that bog turtle impact and that bog turtle hit. So again, look at those things, and is there ways to minimize those impacts? Here's a typical project, a small residential subdivision. Stream with a lake, with wetlands around the lake, and the bright green line would be the riparian buffer. So again, in this case, one of the things that happens is if you have a project that has a stream crossing or a core, it's a core requirement that if you have a core impact, such as a stream crossing, and you have wetlands on your project over 0.25 acres, that requires a restrictive covenant on all the lots of your subdivision. Okay? So again, and the reason for that is there's like a slow degradation and a slow loss of wetlands over time, usually in these residential areas. So again, if you can get rid of that stream crossing and get rid of that permit, that takes the deed restrictions off of all the lots as well. The buffer impacts. So because of the stream crossing and the buffer impacts, with the Act 162, that brings in the 100-foot trigger off wetlands. So in this case, because you have that large wetland along the back of those parcels, because you could have earth disturbance now within that 100-foot wetland area, now you're into offsetting. Now you're into additional costs for your riparian buffer impacts. So again, think of these things. These are ways we can move and redesign the projects to basically cut our costs and to cut our impacts. So again, moving that road out of the stream crossing gets rid of the deed description. It gets rid of the buffer impacts. It gets rid of the requirement for the for the 100 feet off the wetlands for determining offsetting. So again, think of these things as you're doing your project. So to basically summarize that, identify the players and agencies that are going to be involved in your project. Understand what the overlaps and impacts are between those various agencies and between the permits, and determine who's going to drive that process. Okay, and who's going to drive the time frames for approval. Minimize required permits through your design. Okay, so this is the other piece that comes out of your threshold for MPDS is your road widening. So typical road widening project, and how do you show that on your plans? And this also to the lady's comment about how do you show these impacts. So let's look at this. Basically, your existing cartway is usually a mill and overlay operation. So in that case, basically that's within your permit boundary, but it is not considered earth disturbance because you're not taking it down to full depth replacement. So again, that would be shown in your boundary but not included in your earth disturbance. Shoulders, PennDOT usually has you upgrade the shoulders, full depth replacement, right? So that area would both be included in your disturbance and in your boundary. And obviously the widening, any of the widening would be included in both as well. So how do you show that on your plans, especially worksheets 4, 12, and 13 if you're using 12 and 13? Basically what we like to see is, so the mill and overlays are considered road maintenance activities. They do not need to be considered in your calculations. Best thing to do is to break these out in your calculations. Good way to show it is to break it down basically from the top down. Start with your project area. Take out the areas that are not being disturbed by your project. Then take out those mill and overlay areas that come out. And this is a good example of how to show that. You know, you have a project area of 10.4. The area that's not being impacted is 4.2. And then your road maintenance activities are 0.6 acres. And you get a total area of dirt disturbance of 5.6 acres. And that should match what's on your notice of intent or your NOI form. Worksheet 4, the easiest way to do it is to, start at worksheet 1, take out what you can on worksheet 2, take out what you can on worksheet 3. When you get to worksheet 4, if you have areas that are undisturbed, include them both in your pre-development and your post-development. Tag them that way, they'll wash out. You should get the same value for your volume requirement. In either case, and it's a lot easier then for the reviewers and everybody to understand what you did in that case. So, any questions? Anything more? No? Okay, thank you. Oh, yes, Lisa.
How does Monroe and Pike County consider timber matting, temporary timber matting as earth disturbance?
Drew? You look like you were saying that.
What was the question? I didn't hear.
Do we consider timber matting as earth disturbance? Yeah, I would say no. That's because you're laying it right on the existing ground. If you were stripping first and putting it down, it'd be a different story. But
there's generally some incidental disturbance when the mats are being pulled up.
yeah.
So depending on the application, I mean, we've seen some in some wetland mattings that ended up being many mats thick because they just kept on going down. So when they were pulled up, there was earth disturbance and they had to address it.
Thanks.
Any others? Rich?
You mentioned coordinating and circulating minutes among multiple agencies. If you have a situation where an agency doesn't respond or acknowledge the minutes that were circulated, maybe they have something to do with roads, and then they later change their mind from what they said in that pre-app meeting, how would you suggest?
We proceeded based on you not providing any conflicting information. I mean, I can't tell you how to argue with that agency or how to argue with your client about that, but again, you give them the opportunity, you put the draft minutes out there, you give them the opportunity to clarify. You've done your part. If they come back and change their mind, it's, you could ask them why, or why didn't you comment on that, but I don't know if that's going to get you a better answer. Yes?
How about gravel dumped on grade to go through?
At what?
Gravel dumped on grade to go through. Like the access road in that thing.
Well, if you look at the gravel dumped on existing ground, like just a gravel stockpile area,
No, really.
gravel on top of Undisturbed?
Yeah.
Well, if you look at the definition of earth disturbance, the stockpiling or the storage of earth and soil materials is considered earth disturbance in that case.
That's gravel, which is stabilized immediately when it comes down.
Well, again, it could be earth disturbance, but it could be earth disturbance that is basically stabilized earth disturbance in that case.
Towards the acre.
What was that?
Does it count towards the acre?
I think strictly with the definition, yes, it would count.
It's rock, it's not dirt. It's rock.
But again, if you look at the soil and rock materials are considered in the earth disturbance definition.
Most municipal stormwater ordinances will incorporate that, and that will be considered an earth disturbance under the ordinance, and that's from the model from the state. Even if it's clean stone.
Okay.
It's really the reformed argue for right.
Yeah, I mean, we go by the regulations. There may be other ordinances or other documents out there, but, you know, the regulations are what we go by. Any others? Okay. Thank you. Are we wrapped?